Hello and welcome to the channel. So today's video is going to be about eliminating moles. Now I bought this property about 11 years ago, and ever since that time I've had very persistent issues with moles. Just to give you a quick example, a few years back I was up on a ladder working on the side of my house when a mole tunnel underneath the ladder collapsed. Now I didn't know the mole tunnel was there because it was several inches underground and not visible. But when it collapsed, it caused the ladder to shift suddenly to the side, which gave me quite a scare. Now, I was really lucky in this case because I was able to grab onto a post and get down onto my deck railing and then onto my deck safely. But a couple of months later, I wasn't quite so lucky because I was out around the shop carrying some heavy things in my hands when a mole tunnel collapsed underneath my foot. It ended up twisting my ankle pretty severely, and I was limping around without injury for quite a few months. The moles have also dug up around the pipe which carries propane into my house. That was a bit scary. They've also dug tunnels underneath my house which provided mice an easy access point. And the abandoned mole mounds and tunnels, those have promoted the yellow jacket population by providing them with easy shelter. Not to mention all the damage they've done to my yard over the years. So I spent a lot of time and effort in learning how to eliminate moles when they show up. And today's video, I'm going to be showing you what I've learned over the years. And I'll even provide a real-world example because there's an active mole out in the yard right now. Now, before I get into the way I eliminate moles, let me first mention a couple things which I actually haven't tried. That includes deterrents and poisons. Now, deterrents come in the way of things like ultrasonic devices or oils which you can place in the yard, which supposedly will repel moles through sound or through smell. Now, those things, because of the size of my yard, just really aren't very practical. And after reading a lot of reviews, I've become convinced that they're also not very effective either. And with regards to poisons, you know, they're little poisonous gummy worms that you can put into a mole tunnel and hope that the mole eats them. But I don't really like the idea of adding toxins to the environment and into the food chain, which may impact other animals and may leach into my well water. And by the way, all the devices I talk about today will be listed down in the video description area. So let's talk about the option of gassing. So you can inject poisonous gases into a mole tunnel system by the way of something like this. This is called the giant destroyer or a gopher gasser. And basically you just light the fuse there and you throw it down into the tunnel system. Or you can use a device like this which fits around the exhaust pipe of a vehicle and uses carbon monoxide to again poison the tunnel system. Now, I've tried these a lot, but what I found is that oftentimes it doesn't kill the mole, and what will happen is the mole will just leave the immediate area, but it usually comes back after a few weeks of time. So I don't use the gassing method anymore because I just found that it's not the most consistent or effective means for killing moles. So in my experience, trapping has been the most consistent way of eliminating moles, and when you use a trap, you know for sure whether or not you've killed the mole. Now, I've used a lot of different types of traps, and so I'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of the different types. And I'll start with these two here. So these look different, but they're actually very similar in that you set them up from the top side of a tunnel, and you don't really need to dig anything out. So the way these work is you set a depression in the tunnel, and then you put the trigger mechanism above that depression. And so when a mole walks by, he notices the depression, he goes to push up on the depression to fix it. He sets off the trigger and gets caught in the trap. Now, this particular trap here, in my opinion, is a lot easier to use than this one just because it's so easy to set. You basically just push down on this bar here with your foot. It's probably the easiest trap that I own to set, and I've caught a lot of moles with this trap. Now, over time, it's gotten a bit rusty, so I just make sure I use a little bit of lubrication on the joints. Otherwise, the amount of force required to set off the trigger may be too much for the mole. I've also caught some moles with this gopher hawk trap here. It's a pretty easy trap to set up, and just like these others, you set the trap from the top side of a tunnel. Now, this little device here you use to poke a hole in the tunnel, and this is the actual trap. Now, the primary downside of this trap, in my opinion, is the fact that the little prongs that catch the mole on the end here are pretty thin and they're easily bent up. Now, this is a different type of trap. This is actually a live trap, and instead of placing it from the top side of a tunnel, this actually goes inside of a tunnel. Now you need a fairly long straight section of tunnel in order to place this in, and the way it works is you basically just have these little one-way doors. So the idea is the mole enters in this way, but he can't walk back out. So it's pretty simple, and I have caught a mole with this trap before, but it's not as effective as some of my other traps because a lot of times the moles can detect this inside the tunnel, and they end up just packing the inside with dirt, basically rendering it useless. Now the primary downside of all these traps here is the fact that they require you to know where a tunnel is. And on my property, most of the tunnels have been dug 6 to 12 inches down below the surface. They have a lot of twists and turns, and they're difficult to locate even with a probe. But if I do happen to have a tunnel which is near the surface and visible, I usually start with this WireTech trap here because it's very effective and it's the easiest trap I have to set. Now the key advantage of these traps here is the fact that you don't need to find a length of tunnel in order to set them. You can set them right at a tunnel entryway from within a mole mound. Now that's a huge advantage because the mole mounds are easily visible and the tunnels are actually easy to access once you excavate the dirt from the mole mound and remove any dirt plugs from the tunnel entryway. Now these two traps here, I haven't used that often. I've never actually caught any moles with these. And the reason I don't use them that often is I don't really like this style of trigger design all that much. I find that it's not super consistent, and I have traps that work effectively and have a more consistent trigger action than these traps here. And this guy here, this is a Victor scissors trap. I found that it's really difficult to set, at least it was for me. And again, since I have other traps which work effectively and are easier to set, I've never actually used this trap, so I can't really tell you how effective it is at catching moles. Now this is the second most effective type of trap that I've tried, and just like the prior traps, it has the advantage of being able to set it at a tunnel entryway from within a excavated mole mound. Now this is actually a gopher trap, it's not actually a mole trap, and when it was new it was a little bit too long to catch the smaller moles, and so I've implemented a bit of a modification in that I've slid the trigger mechanism up the shaft, so the distance between the trigger and the little entrapment arms here has been reduced, allowing me to catch a very short mole if I need to. Now these traps are very easy to set, and they're small enough to where I can put them inside of a tunnel entryway without having to dig out a larger hole. So that's a big advantage there. And I have caught a lot of moles with these traps, but I will say that on occasion they're able to detect the trap without getting caught inside. So this is called a cinch trap, and it is the most effective type of trap that I've tried, and it's caught the most moles. I think this long arm here, which places the trigger mechanism deep inside the tunnel, helps to improve the chances of success. So when a mole comes into contact with this trap, it usually tries to push it out of the tunnel, and it does so by pushing on this little trigger mechanism here, which sets off the trap and almost always catches the mole. Now the only downside to this trap, in my opinion, is its overall size. It's fairly large, and it's usually too big to fit more than one of these inside of an excavated mole mound without having to widen the mole mound out with the shovel. So in order to reduce the amount of digging I do, and therefore the amount of damage that I do to my yard, I usually use a combination of these larger traps and then these smaller modified gopher traps. So these are the two traps that I use the most often inside of a mole mound, and then if I have a visible mole tunnel, I'll use this trap here. So let's go outside and I'll show you how I set these up, and hopefully we'll catch a mole. Okay, so as you can see here, I have 3 mole mounds right in a row. Now I have a couple more out that way and a few more out that way. So I think that the mole is using this area here as sort of a thoroughfare to connect both sides of the yard. And I'm going to start here with this mole mound here in the middle, because I think that'll give me access to the center of this tunnel, so I can put a trap going in that way and a trap going in that way. Remember, I don't know which way the mole is going to be walking. I don't know if it's over on that side of the yard or on that side of the yard. So if you get a trap going in both directions, you increase your chances of catching it. So I'm going to go ahead and extricate this dirt here and start getting a trap in place. Okay, so I'm going to use this little garden shovel here. I find that that's usually all I ever need. This is an aluminum shovel and it's pretty strong, and of course it doesn't rust. Now the dirt here is going to be really moist. It's been raining here recently, so that's unfortunate, but that's how it is. I'm just going to move the dirt out of the way and try to get to the point where I can see the tunnel. And sometimes you have to use your fingers a bit and kind of feel around. Okay. So the mole mound is on the top of the surface here, and usually the moles will plug up the area just underneath the mole mound, and then the tunnel could be several inches below it. So now I'm just going to remove this plug, and that should give me access to the tunnel. And by the way, even though these three mounds are in a line, the tunnels never run straight. They always move all around. So you kind of have to deal with that as well. For example, looks like one of the hole entrances to the tunnel is actually going in that direction, whereas the next mound over is over that way. Now I'm just kind of using my fingers to push all the way around this hole, because oftentimes a mole mound will be right on the center of a sort of intersection where you may have 2-3 tunnels connecting in. But in this case, I just have two. I have a tunnel going out that way and a tunnel going out that way in the general direction of those two other mole mounds that I showed you. And so I'm just kind of clearing out the plugs here so I have good access to the tunnels. And I think we're good there. I can go ahead and put some traps in. Now, here's the problem. So this is not a very big hole. And this is the trap that I want to use. Now you can see that this has a lot of surface area, and I may be able to get one down in there, but certainly not two. So I have a couple of options. I can widen this hole, and that sort of defeats the purpose because it takes a longer time. It's really doing more damage to my yard. The other option is I can use one of these larger traps and then one of these smaller traps. Now, these really aren't as effective as these, so it's a bit of a trade-off. So for now, I'm going to use one of these small ones and one of these large ones here. Now, setting these little traps is pretty straightforward. You just push down here in the center and get this little bar wrapped around like this, and then this goes like that, and then it goes right into the tunnel. And of course, you want to make sure that this section here is going into the tunnel, so if the mole walks this way, he's going to push up against this little tab, and the trap will close around the body of the mole. So I'm just going to set that down into the tunnel as far as I can get it. Now, something to take note, the farther into the tunnel, the better, and that's because it seems that the moles have a tendency to be able to detect the traps. If they're really close to the mole mound, they'll just go ahead and pull dirt down around the trap and just seal it up, and instead of walking into the trap. So you don't want that. If you get it farther down into the tunnel, a lot of times they'll just walk right over it, not realizing it's there, and they get trapped that way. Now I have this cord here. This is a bit of paracord. The reason is that, again, the moles have a tendency to put dirt all the way around the trap, and sometimes when they do that, it's hard to get the trap back out without digging up more dirt. So put this paracord on there, and that allows me to pull the trap back out if that happens. And then I'm just going to put a flag here, pin it down so that the trap can't go anywhere. Okay, and I'm going to use this trap on the other side. Now these are really superior, having this long portion here. This really gets in far into the tunnel. And these are a little bit trickier to set, especially when they're new. They can be really, really stiff. This one's not new, so it's not too bad. So to set that, you put these little poles here in the downward position, and then this swings over, and this first one goes on top, and then the second one goes on top of the first one, and looks something like that. Now you need to be careful at this point. This has quite a bit of power. You don't want to get your finger down in there. And then this is what actually sets the trap off. So the mole will come through these two little prongs here, push up against this piece, and this will spring the trap. Now I like to set them so that there's not a lot of pushing required on this end. So I like to have this piece here right on the edge. I would call that a hair trigger, if you will. So there's not a lot of movement down on this end to make this go off. And when you put it in place, you want to keep your hand or your thumb on top of this piece here. This is going to set off the trap. So if this gets pushed out accidentally, you don't want the trap going off. So I just keep my thumb on this piece here. Now, ideally, you want the trap to be as horizontal as possible. I don't really have the room for it, so I'm going to widen this tunnel just a little bit without trying to dig it out too much, just to give me a little more space here for this bigger trap. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure I have enough room for the trap to go off. And I think we're good there. So I'm going to leave it like that. Now there's one more really important step, and that is, I also noticed that the moles, if they detect anything wrong, they can detect fresh air. So if they detect too much fresh air, again, instead of coming up to the mole mound or the section here, they'll just enclose the area, plug it off on either side. So this is a really simple but really important step. I just use a little bucket to cover up the hole there. And that simple step has improved my chances of catching moles significantly. So I do this all the time now. It took me a really long time to figure this out, but this is really an effective method. And you can put a little bit of dirt around the bucket just to hold it in place. Okay, I have another mound here on the other side of the property. I'm going to go ahead and set a couple of traps just like I did before. In my experience, you always want to put multiple traps down to help increase your chances of catching the mole. If you just put traps in one section of the tunnel, it's a lot less likely you'll actually catch anything. Okay, so I've widened this hole a bit. Now I have one tunnel going out that way and one tunnel going out that way. So this should be sufficiently large to put two traps in. So I'm going to put one in there, and then this one will go in here. And again, make sure I have clearance to allow the trap to go off. So now I just need to get a bucket on top here. And I'll put a little dirt around the edge to keep it in place. Okay, so that's 4 traps set, and I'm going to go ahead and stop here. Now, the reason for that is I don't know where this mole is. It's possible that he's gone ahead and moved off to another area. I don't want to do any more work until I know for sure that he's in this area. So I'll go ahead and stop, and I'll check the traps tomorrow. Hopefully I'll get lucky and he'll be in one of the traps. If not, if he's moved off to a different area, there should be more new mole mounds in that area, and I'll set traps up there. So that's it for today. I'll go ahead and check back in tomorrow. Okay, so it's the next day, and I actually have some activity here on the first hole, but not on the second hole. So let me take the traps out and see what we have. Okay, so as you can see here, he's completely plugged up this hole where this small gopher trap is sitting here. So I'm going to go ahead and dig this out and see if there's anything in the trap, and if not, I'll go ahead and reset the traps. So somehow the mole's managed to get all around this trap, but not in it. So you can see it's not been set off. But now I know he's over in that direction there. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out this dirt. Okay, so that's it. I'll put the bucket back on. And once again, we'll wait for tomorrow and see if we get any more activity. So it's been a while since I first set these traps, and I haven't been having very good luck with these gopher style traps here. It seems that the mole in question has been able to detect these, and he's just been pulling dirt up around them and basically enclosing them into a large ball of dirt. So this particular hole, I've been seeing some activity, so I went ahead and widened the hole so it could fit 2 cinch traps, and I'm seeing a really good sign here now. I think I may have a mole. Let me bring the camera over and I'll show you. Hello, mister. Okay, so you can see here the right side trap is still set. There's been no activity here. And on the left side, you can see this trap has actually gone off. but I don't see any dirt around here, not very much. So sometimes if the mole's detected the trap, he'll pull dirt all around it to kind of encase it. But in this case, I don't see that. So I think there's probably a mole in the trap. These particular traps, they rarely go off without catching a mole. So let me pull this trap out and see what I got. Okay, there's the offending party there. So this guy's totally dead. I'm just going to go ahead and pull him out of the trap, put him back in the hole, in the tunnel where he came from, and bury him in there. All right, well, there you have it. That is the best way that I know of to get rid of moles, and sometimes persistence just pays off. If you've been having trouble with moles on your property, I hope this video was helpful. And I've got a bunch of mole mounds on the property now that need to be addressed, so I need to get back to work, and we'll see you next time.